Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is George, and I'm your friendly neighborhood anime and manga fan. I love all things anime and all things manga, and I'm here today to talk about Mashle, Magic and Muscles episode 9. So, what did I think about this week's episode? I thought this week's episode was phenomenal. I absolutely love this week's episode. I think this week's episode is the best of the show, and that's without any contest. Like, I thought this episode was just it's exceptional. I thought it really showcased Lance and Mash, and really focus in why Mash to me is such a great MC, because he's not just a one note character. He has more than that. He isn't just the OP, swole Jim Bros guy. He is also a very kind and caring person, and I really appreciate how we get to see more of that in this episode. Now, before we go any farther, I just wanted to give you guys a quick reminder to make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you guys can be up to date with all my Mashle, Magic and Muscles, as well as all my anime and manga content that I'll be providing in this channel. It really helps out a lot, and I would really appreciate it if you guys could subscribe to my YouTube channel. So if you guys could, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get into this week's episode. So this week's episode starts off where we left off last time, which is pretty much, the group got separated, and now they're gonna face off against Magalupe's members. So we see pretty much Lance fight the Third Fang, and it's a good fight. And the Third Fang actually has a lot of cool magic, because he can make, like, in other words, clones of himself. So, like, he makes clones, like mud clones. And the whole strategy behind this fight is, Lance is trying to figure out where's the original at, and he keeps destroying all these clones, but he can't find the original. But eventually the original shows up, and he starts taking back on Lance. Lance is being pushed back, and Lance is like, whoa. Now, it doesn't take too long for Lance to start taking, getting the upper hand in the fight, because he starts, analyzing, like, okay, I know where he's at, and he starts throwing a bunch of pebble that was during the fight, and he starts throwing it towards the wall where the mud is, expecting to hit the original copy, and he starts damaging the original copy. So therefore he gets out, and he starts, like, he's no longer camping. He's actually trying to take the initiative and fight head on with Lance. And we see that he's pissed off, because he's like, you should be joining us. Like, why are you with these scum, the antlers? Like, you're better than that. And Lance is just like, no, like, I'm where I'm supposed to be, and you're scum to me. Like, you're anybody that looks down on people like that, I think you're terrible. So then Worth, he's like, okay, enough of this, and he drinks a potion, and it gives him like a buff. And then he performs a second. I think that's how you say a second. And what a second is pretty much a very powerful spell that only a couple of wizards themselves can do, and it's really powerful. And you see, like, everybody has their version. It's kind of like a domain expansion from Jujutsu Kaisen, if you guys want to get an idea of what I'm talking about. And where it's he summons a big monster, and he's like, this monster, this is it, you're done, Lance. But then we find out that Lance is like, nope, I'm gonna show you my second. And you see Lance just pulls out these pillars, and the guy's like, what is this? And then you find out that whatever's in those pillars are pretty much being pulled by gravity, and they're being squished, and Lance just one shots this huge creature, and the guy's just stunned. He's like, wow, that was my strongest creature, and I also took a buff. Like, I drank this potion that was gonna get me stronger, and I still lost. He's just pretty much like, no way, like, I'm supposed to be above this. And then we cut to a flashback of pretty much Worth, and how his father, and he always kind of told him, like, in this world, power is the only thing that drives you, and if you don't have any power, you're gonna be left behind, and you're gonna be scum. And if you're gonna be that, I don't want to be associated with you. I don't want a son that's a failure. And just from a quick dialogue that Lance has heard from him, he starts pinpointing, like, okay, this guy is pretty similar to me when it comes to how family, they look down on people that are not quote unquote strong enough. Similar to Lance with his sister, how his sister is losing her magic, and the family's kind of disowning her. Lance is pretty much pinpointing that into himself, and he's like, you know what, me and you are not so different. And he eventually he lets the guy go, and they have a mutual respect, I like to think, after the fight, because they both they're fun of each other in that sense. And the guy even says, like, man, how dare he be so cool, like, kind of like something along those lines. And I really like how this episode touches on the antagonists, and they're not just evil. They actually have a backstory, and some character development within them. And I think that's awesome, because we don't see too much of that in shonen nowadays, because for the most part, a lot of the time, the villains, they're just the villains, and that's it. But I really like how we get to see a little bit of insight of what's behind the curtain when it comes to the villains. And talking about what's behind the curtain, let's talk about what's behind the mask, because Mash fights Abyss, and this fight was exceptional. I think this fight was awesome. This fight, it was a 10 out of 10 for me, because the music and just the pure adrenaline that was bumping like in that fight. Like Mash is in like this dude is just built different. I know I always say that, but he really is, because Mash is fighting Abyss, and Abyss's technique is actually pretty interesting because his magic, we find out in this episode, it's to accelerate stuff. So he himself is really fast, and that's the thing. This fight is all about speed versus strength, because when it comes to the speed, you know, Abyss has the advantage for sure, because Mash is not as fast as Abyss. So Abyss takes advantage of that, and he starts damaging Mash all over the place. Like he starts slashing him with his sword, and Mash is like kind of like, what am I supposed to do? He's just kind of taking the backseat, you know. He can't really approach because he can't reach Abyss. And what it comes down to, eventually Abyss gets a stab in on Mash, and Mash is like pretty much like unfazed by it, and the guy's like, what is this? And Mash, this was when I knew when this dude is in another level, because he gets stabbed in the stomach with a sword, and then Abyss is trying to pull the sword back, and he's like, what? Is he really clenching his muscles? So Mash, super shredded. My man got the most powerful six-pack in the game, because pulling a sword and not like, you know, tying it, like you're pretty much holding a sword and not being able to pull it. Like my man is trying to be like King Arthur. He's trying to be the stone that held King Arthur's sword, because nobody can get that sword out of Mash's stomach. But what happens is Mash is like, nah, I got you where I wanted. And Mash just grabs him and gives him a huge headbutt, and that was crazy. He pretty much, he cracks the mask, and the guy's like, what? Like, what is this? So then he gets really mad. He's like, okay, let's step it up another level. And they do step it up another level, because what happens is Abyss, you know, he summons his second, and his second is actually pretty cool. And pretty broken, because what happens is it's like a big bubble, and anything that's within that bubble, their speed decreases, and Abyss gains that speed. So it's a nerf to your opponent and a buff to yourself. So that's a very powerful technique, and he's really taking advantage of it, because Mash is like, you know, even at more of a disadvantage now. And Abyss keeps pressing Mash, and eventually there's a moment where Mash just punches the floor, and Abyss is like, what is he doing? And you know what happens is Mash was trying to distract Abyss, and because now he has no footing to, you know, run around. And what Mash does is he then punches, you know, right at Abyss and cracks the sword. Like the sword gets destroyed. Abyss does not take any damage though, but his weapon is destroyed, and Abyss is like, okay, I gotta get out of here now. So he's trying to go back, but we find out that Mash put his foot on top of Abyss's foot, and he's just clenching into it, so he does not run away. And what does Mash do after that? He gives him the meanest punch in the stomach, and then he just proceeds to give him a huge ass whooping. Like, to say that Abyss got obliterated after that would be an understatement, because Mash just completely, you know, bodied the dude, and then he even gave him a German suplex at the end to top it all off. So Mash really went all out in this fight, because up to this point it is his hardest fight, and I can only assume how, you know, the number one Abel will be against Mash, because after the fight, Biz is telling Mash like, hey, just so you know, you stand no chance against the number one. And Mash is like, oh, it doesn't matter, I'll still kick his ass. But then we also get a flashback where we see Abyss's backstory, and we see that, you know, because of his eye, I was correct in my previous reviews where I said that his eye can turn off people's magic. And even Mash at one point in comments like, oh, so it's pretty useless against me. Sorry about that. So I thought that was funny. But we see his flashback, and we see that he's kind of like a cursed child, in the sense that, you know, everybody in his family hated him because they see like you turn off magic, and magic is a very important part in the world of the wizards. So they kind of see him as a disgrace, like something that should not be born, as a mistake. And, you know, they lock him up, and pretty much he's kept as a prisoner, like kind of in his own house, in the attic or the basement or whatever. And eventually one day his mom even tries to kill him. So like Abyss has a tragic backstory, and, you know, it's very sad, like I said. And what happens is Abyss, at the end of the day, he's like, you know what, I'm glad that I met Magia Lupus, because they were the people that were there to, you know, help me, and why not. And Mash is pretty much, you know, after hearing all that, he's like, okay, I don't hate you, I think you're actually a pretty cool guy, and let's be friends. And the guy's like, no, like, don't, because you'll eventually look down on me. Like, no, I don't want you to be friends with me, because I know eventually you'll be like, no, you're a monster, I don't want to do anything with you. And Mash is like, no, my father taught me, you know, to always treat people kindly, and I will never do something like that. Like, I think if I want to be your friend at the end of the day, and I think you're a cool guy, man. And he just has a nice moment with him, and I thought that was cool. And even Abyss is like, what a guy. Like, he's just like, what a weird guy. And yeah, Mash is a very weird guy, but he's also a very kind and loving person. And I really like how, you have the most powerful person in the verse, and he just happens to be, he might be dumb, and he might be not the smartest when it comes to the books, but he is a very kind-hearted person. And that's one of the features I love about Mash as a whole. Overall, I thought this episode was fantastic, and I cannot wait to see where the story goes from here, because I think now we're going to see Mash fight the number 1. And I'm also curious to see what's Finn and Dot and their situation is going to go down, because they still haven't fought. So I'm looking forward to see if Finn can step up to the plate and fight against, some Magia Lupus. But with all that being said, what did you guys think about this week's episode? Did you guys love it? Did you guys hate it? Did you guys think it was alright? Whatever you guys thought, let me know in the comment section down below. Also, thank you so much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more Mashle, Magic, and Muscles, as well as more anime and manga content in the near future. But yeah, with that being said, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.